Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. We are at our Achieving Unity Success Formula. This is where we work every week. And I hope you have it in your calendar. And I'm going to mention that several times in this podcast. Want to be with you every week at this time. We have some awesome guests. We talk about achieving unity, and we have the guide. This is all about achieving unity through the power of encouraging, inspiring, and including others personally and professionally. On the page, you'll see my Achieving Unity guide. Feel free to go out to our site. It's up at the top, the sign up dash newsletter, or use the QR code down at the bottom left of your screen. Get the Unity guide and give us feedback. We're always wanting to talk with you more. I am Mark Intrican, and this is about creating solutions, one reality at a time. And that's how we get to achieving unity. As I mentioned, it is personally and professionally. It is about us transforming our world from what we had yesterday to what we want it to be today and tomorrow. Some of the things that I do is by achieving unity. I work on the business side. We'll talk about those in a few minutes on different screens, but we can do that by working together. Achieving Unity Success Formula. This is podcast number 28. I don't know what your lucky number is, but hope for our guest tonight, I hope it's number 28. It's my lucky number because I'm so thrilled to have our guest tonight. I'll introduce him more in a second. But our podcast is on every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Excuse me. All these cold, flus, viruses, and allergies going around the United States at the current time. No telling what we have going on. The company is Reality Focused Dynamics, su- delivering success focused solutions. And if you look at the logo at the top right, you'll see where it says Reality Focused Dynamics from left to right, Success Focused Solutions from top to bottom, going from good to better to best. On the business side, we work on using Agile and Lean inside and outside of computer software. For those of you that are engineers on the call, you can catch on to that right away. A lot of business people, you can catch on to that. But this is a little bit new to many of the non-technical work areas. So what I want to talk about is what Agile and Lean are, and this is how I work with corporations around the world. Agile is the ability to create and respond to changes and improvements. It enables success in uncertain and possibly struggling environments by emphasizing adaptability through better collaboration, us working together, and communication, talking to one another. I'll show an example of this in just a second where it brings it into the home. Lean is a methodology focused on maximizing value by minimizing waste and optimizing our processes through continuous improvement, effectiveness, and efficiency. And you hear about the DOGE now. It's all about, talks about efficiency in the United States. What we need to think on first is effectiveness, because we must be effective before we can ever become efficiency, or before we ever become efficient. The philosophy can be used in every discipline, every vertical, including our homes and family. Connect with me and I'll show you how to break down all issues, products, and services from the most complex business projects, including rocket science. And I have worked for Boeing and Lockheed Martin. I have seen a rocket being built. It's an awesome experience. But we can break this down to the basic steps of training our teenagers. How do we do that? First, we start with the little acronyms that I created of WID, BID, RID, GID. Write it down, break it down, review its dependencies, get it done. And we can do that, and we can even, again, do that with our teenagers. We can start early, then they can take it on to make those high income positions that they'll have later. Think of something as simple as busy mornings at a family breakfast. Everyone has somewhere to go, something to do, going to work, going to school, all the many events, different locations that we have to go. Think about having a family stand-up meeting each evening before that busy morning. During the evening meeting, everyone shares what their needs or tasks are during the next day. They'll take what those busy tasks are and place them on sticky notes on the refrigerator with those chores and responsibilities. Then in the morning, each person can move that sticky note from to do, which is where it was last night, to done, which is where it is in the morning. At breakfast, you could even create a breakfast station, pre-portioned ingredients, put up a weekly meal plan. There's ways to make life so much more straightforward. There are difficulties, there are challenges, life happens, but we can make it much more straightforward so we don't have to minimize that decision fatigue, which is what we have a lot of times in a stressful environment, making decisions, snap of a finger. We want to reduce the time spent searching for items and help everyone participate in a smoother, more efficient process because of the effectiveness we put in that chain going forward. Achieving unity through encouragement, encouraging each other, inspiring those who have done well, and inclusion. We are all intelligent. We all have different insights into what's going on and what we need to do. We want to include us all so we can learn and build. Encouragement can be that powerful force that fuels the core of empowerment, empowering others. Encourage others to help accomplish their goals. Inspire each other to achieve every goal, achieving unity. Unity makes us all a successful team. Include others. Celebrate every victory, no matter how small, both personally and professionally. Even at your home, celebrate those wins. Sometimes we call them tasks. I call them wins because it's a winner. We win when we get a task done, when we accomplish something. Because together, each of us can overcome every challenge by working together, by achieving unity. As I said, unity starts at home. It shapes society. It transforms workplaces, even in the issues with relationships. Are you facing relationship challenges? Maybe parenting difficulties? Are you or you someone you know may be struggling with relationship issues or parenting time issues as a divorced or divorcing parent? We can transform that frustration with understanding to take it away from what the frustration? What is the value in our actions? And that's what we learn. We realize that anger holds no value. Anger, Anger. Anger is just actions not gaining effective results. Let's remember that. Whoever wins anything by being angry? Anger has no value. As I mentioned, life happens. We work on the internet all the time. Last week we had an internet outage during the middle of our podcast. Life happens from personal relationships to parenting time to prenuptial agreements for some people, but they're not getting married, but they're having a relationship. Nuptial is not required. It's not like some of the times they're called the prenuptial agreement, but sometimes there's no nuptial. But we can still work together. We can learn to embrace and enjoy every moment and every challenge we have together, again, personally and professionally. One vision, one goal, achieving unity in all areas of life. Quickly, tomorrow's the big day. We have our first free podcast. You can see the QR code in the bottom right. Tomorrow afternoon, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, I'm holding a free online seminar, sometimes called a webinar, at 1 p.m. again, the same time frame. And we're going to be talking about some of the same issues that I just brought up this afternoon. Join. It's free. Come join us. Go out to my markandtrickin.com. Go to the Success Formula webinar. Love to have you there. Let's learn more. We can also get into my course, my 7-session course. Put this into action. Put this into our life. QR code on the left is my website home. QR code on the right is a contact page. Contact me. Ask questions. Do you have questions? Would you like to see something else? How can you take part in achieving unity? Upcoming podcast next week: storytelling, effective marketing success. Allison Verhalen. Week after that, leadership resilience and team retention. Rose Harrow. Win Anyway. Rich Hopkins, international award-winning speaker. The Dad Edge. Larry Hagner. Then Polishing Your Presence for Impact by Tom Coben. That's all of April. And see, in June, we're going to have all Father Dad podcast. In August, we're going to have all Mother Mom podcast, how we achieve as parents and how we have grown together throughout our lives and situations such as the divorce. But how can we build better relationships personally and professionally? So I hope you join with every week. That's what's coming up for the next 5 weeks. We have so much more coming on. But today, this is the biggest excitement. Now we're talking to today is the business emergency medical technician. He's the EMT. Leaders get promoted by improving their bedside manner and learning how to protect their biggest asset. Jason Giove's journey into the heart of leadership and life saving began over 2 decades ago in New York. He spent 24 years in various leadership roles at a prominent multinational not-for-profit organization. As a minister and public speaker, Jason delivered inspiring keynote addresses across the country, touching lives with his word, his commitment to service. His dual role as a state-certified emergency medical technician enriched his experiences, allowing him to extend his impact into critical emergency services. His LinkedIn address is down to the bottom right. Okay, let me switch screens now and get out of the share screen. I switch over and let's bring Jason up to the screen. Jason, how are you today? Good to
Hey,
have
hey,
you.
hey, Mark. Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you so much. I put you in the center and pin you up there. Now put me up there
Okay.
beside you so we can share in our discussion. Excellent. I always turn to Renee on these things. She chats with me, make sure I do everything right. I need to put her into more control. She does so much better than I do.
I
Jason,
understand.
again, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here. We have talked many times. We've talked business together. We've talked about success together. It's so awesome because of what you do and how you do it. But you also talk about that, as I mentioned, that business EMT. How do you do it? How do you translate that emergency medical principles into an effective business leadership?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mark. It's a privilege to be here. And yeah, I realized after leaving the 24 years in that corporate role, and I was also serving as an EMT in New York, as I launched out and started my own businesses, I realized that basically that crisis management and the ability to help people fast to make things better translated well into the business setting. So initially, I started safety training business, Leadership 911, where basically I help organizations, banks, and schools with emergency response training. So that's CPR, first aid, active shooter response training. So that's how I initially got started into the entrepreneurial space. And that business is going very well. It's very fulfilling. I have a team of trainers. I train all over the country. Bank of America is one of my biggest clients. And so that's very fulfilling, being able to train people and prepare them for actual emergencies. Now, shifting over into business and coaching and speaking, it occurred to me that, everybody has business needs. People's businesses may be bleeding out, if you will. So I started to realize that helping them with the very same first responder framework of assessing where the real problem is and then taking immediate action would translate well. And so I started a company that basically helps coaches to start and launch their first group program in 90 days. And then when I'm doing speaking on at events, corporate events, educational events, basically I'm showing managers, because that's where I've spent most of my time, how to take treating the person first, not the problem. Okay, that's the
Beautiful.
mantra. That's the mantra in EMS. When I show up, I'm not interested in finding out who is at blame for this car accident. We don't worry about those things. When someone's we treat them first, and then we worry about the rest later. What we're finding is that organizations, when they learn, when managers are able to incorporate that same mindset of taking care of the person first and then the problem usually works itself out. So basically, the EMT on the coaching side stands for Earn Money Today, because I help coaches to get a fast
Oh,
start on their program. So the business EMT, and then on the corporate side, EMT stands for Emotional Management Technician. So with my
wow.
background in positive psychology and emotional intelligence, and as a minister, I help people to take emotional intelligence and package it into crisis response in whether it's HR or organizations.
That's impressive. You're in so many applications, so much in the business and all that you do. That's impressive. And I like your EMT acronyms. It's a great way to take from what we know as EMT to the different areas of business and life.
Hmm.
That is great work. Well, you also talk about, I think it's cardiac arrest and choking and bleeding scenarios in a business in a context. How do you recognize those? How do leaders recognize those?
Excellent. Thank you for that, Mark. Good question. Yeah. So part of what I realized when we're training people on actual emergencies, we help them focus on what we call the big three, and that is there are three medical emergencies that can put someone out before the ambulance can show up. So I refer to those as the big three. When I'm training someone in an actual safety class, we focus on cardiac arrest, when that heart stops, how to recognize it, what to do, choking, and then also bleeding, because those are the things that can affect someone permanently adversely before the ambulance can even show up. So what we've done
They're
is
the quickest. I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but they seem to be the quickest things to pretty much end a person's life.
that's it. That's exactly right. And so by the time they finish my class, they're very, very well aware of how to recognize those three and how to fix them. Now, carry that over into leadership and in a business. In an organization, in a corporate role, the three connections are when the heart is not involved in the job. But we've heard a lot about quiet quitting and these other sort of things. So I teach leaders how to recognize cardiac arrest or heart problems, emotional heart problems, or when a worker's not invested. I teach them how to recognize it, and it's just the same as you would recognize in someone that has gone unresponsive in a real medical scenario. So, step one is to help the leaders understand the signs of a workplace heart attack, the emotional problems that people are starting to experience. So, the first thing is you have to assess the scene. Now, one of the things that's interesting, Mark, is in a medical scenario, when I come up on scene, my first interest is it safe for me? One thing that we see leaders fail at sometimes is they've never been trained to know when you walk into a room and there's just been a hoedown or a shakedown or an argument or something. We teach managers how to recognize whether it's safe for them to enter or whether they need to go upstream and get someone else involved. So there's all kinds of those parallels. In the choking, when someone's choking for real, right, you have techniques that we have to use in order to get it out, and I show them how to do that. In the workplace, what's interesting is one of the biggest complaints we hear is that people feel like they are choking, meaning they don't have a voice. And if a leader doesn't recognize that the person has things to share and to say or to comment on, and if they don't know how to skillfully remove that block, if they don't know how to create the psychological safety so that the person actually feels like they're not choking anymore, that person is never going to thrive. They're not going to be promoted within the organization. So that's how we help leaders with choking. That is emotional blockage or an inability to feel psychologically safe. And we base a lot of our coaching and teaching around. Google ran what's called the Aristotle Project. They had hundreds of their teams answer multiple surveys, and what they realized, Mark, which was amazing, is the number one factor, number one, for innovation and worker satisfaction was psychological safety or the lack thereof.
Right.
So what I help organizations to do is identify when people are choking or when their heart is not involved. And then the last one is bleeding. And bleeding usually is a consequence of two people colliding or two cars colliding. So we apply techniques to help leaders understand when someone is bleeding out because they just got run over by one of their coworkers. And so we kind of help them with that coaching, workshops, et cetera, and in my keynotes to help them recognize how to stop the bleed.
Do you see some blame? I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm going to do this because I love what you're talking about. I mean, JC, you have some great concepts here and how you work on those. And as you mentioned, that blame, sometimes that finding wrong, even though there's not necessarily a wrong, it was a decision that had to be made at the time, right?
Correct.
And people come in, they start finding something wrong with it instead of, as I talk about, encouraging them first about they did step out, they
That's
did
it.
do something, but maybe it wasn't perfect, but we had a learning phase. We had a process of that encouraging. And going back to your step, that bleeding, that's what we have to stop the bleeding. And through that encouraging, that inspiring, can that help?
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought it up, Mark, because another acronym that we find is very useful is when I'm teaching leaders to recognize a heart problem or when someone is in at a critical state in their employment, their retention, their enjoyment, we teach CPR. Now, CPR stands for in the workplace. I also speak sign language, so that's why I'm doing the fingers. We,
Wow, that's
yeah,
excellent.
yeah. My wife and I have helped the deaf community for several years
You're
to
impressive.
thrive. So, what we teach in the workplace, and you'll appreciate this, CPR in the workplace, I teach leaders how to perform CPR, and that is consistent, positive reinforcement.
Wow. Hmm.
So basically, we teach leaders how to actually do CPR in the workplace so that they get, and I'll tell you one thing that we have noticed. Leaders think that they need to be friends with everyone on the job. Not everyone on the job wants to be my friend. And I learned that over years of leadership, and that's okay. So we help them to distinguish just like if I show up on a crash, they're not looking to be my friend. They're looking to get help to get out of their problem. Right? I mean, we may connect later in life if they appreciate that I saved them as an EMT, but the immediate need is not friendship. Here's what we teach. The leader has to be more interested in their professional development, not personal development. Everyone has their own
Okay.
way that they're going to develop personally, and we don't try to impose ourselves on that. But professional development, we're finding that a lot of leaders are afraid, for example, to ask the question, "Hey, after your stint here, what's next? Where do you see yourself going?" See, they want to protect, and that's not being helpful to the person because their professional development is much more complicated than just their role at the company.
That's interesting. I'd like to hear more about that because I've never heard it from that perspective before. What's your next stint? That you're saying that a boss would ask that of an employee, someone on their team?
So, exactly.
Excuse
And
me.
the idea is if we're being honest about and we care about the person's life course, their career, why wouldn't I as a manager take an interest in that? Now, I don't have to go telling the C-suite, or I don't have to use it against the person. But see, that's leadership, because leadership is wanting that individual person to reach their potential and then go beyond. And without those open communication and conversations, who are they going to talk to but you, who they look to as their, professional, superior, or, whatever, however you want to call it.
That brings up a question to me that it's not saying that your next stint has to be away from that same company,
Not at
because
all.
you're talking about psychological safety.
Correct.
Most of us think about that job being there. We want to be there. And there was a time I enjoyed job hunting because the money was there. But
Hmm.
there's a time that comes where you want to be in a position and you'd like to be there for 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 plus years. And that is where that psychological safety comes in the strongest, right?
It's part of it. It's a very good thing you bring up. It's part of it. Now, I think in this gig economy, the days of when you and I were coming up, of you stay with this company for 20, 30, 40 years. It's not the reality. In other words, in order for me to say that to you as an employee, if I'm the manager, and I know that it's not actually true, or doesn't might not necessarily be true, then I'm not being honest and open. So yes, there should definitely be conversations about the growth path within the organization. Absolutely. And effort should be made to give that consistent reinforcement. And when we say positive CPR, consistent positive reinforcement is you're doing good in this area, you could do a little bit better, and here's how. So we're not against feedback, or as they call it, feed forward, because here's one of the things I teach. In a medical emergency, we have to demonstrate what's called leadership bedside manner. That's one of my key principles in my talks and in my coaching. Leadership bedside manner says, what I'm about to do to you to stop that bleeding, it's probably going to hurt.
Hmm.
If I don't do it, it's not going to be a good outcome. Same thing in the workplace, right? When you approach someone with this framework and this training, this mindset, it's what I'm about to say to you. It's not intended to cause pain. If it does, let me know. But I feel, as an expert in this field, I feel that it's the best thing for you. So we kind of train leaders to be able to take that, like, if I don't stop that bleed, I know it's going to hurt for me to push on your arm, or if your arm's like this and I'm going to sling it, that's probably going to hurt. So we train them that language to say, and it's the same thing you mentioned so nicely in the beginning of the intro. Families, a husband to a wife to the child. What I'm about to say or do may cause some pain. That's not my intention, but it is what's needed at this time. Please tell me how it feels. So that's kind of the open, honest communication we try to train.
I like so much about what you're saying, and that positive reinforcement, that CPR, I think it's continuous
Oh,
positive
yep.
reinforcement. Is that the
That's it.
C is?
That's it.
Okay. That fits. I think we parallel so much in there with my encouraging, inspiring, and including others, because that's what that continuous positive reinforcement does by encouraging people, inspiring people, and including others. But you bring on that finalization of, but sometimes we also have to say, this was good, and here's something that has to end or
That's it.
change or improve.
That's it, Mark. So, and that's what's not happening in many sectors of our world today.
It is, and that's one of the things, even with me working with the achieving unity. Many people think that's the soft side, and that's everybody just being rah rah, you know, let's all just be together and shake hands and burn candles. And that's not what it is. It's truly about us coming together and helping each other so that we don't have the conflicts, but we actually have that agreement, pulling in some of your CPR ideas, but achieving that unity by encouraging, and inspiring, including others in the strongest sense of the word. Because that can be very powerful. When you do encourage someone, you can help them move out of that negative situation too, right?
That's it. That's it. And what you said earlier about the judgment, yeah. So basically, just thinking it through from the standpoint of a medical emergency. Okay, someone gets in a car accident, right? There's a process of EMT handing off to a nurse in the ER, handing off to a doctor, and there's an escalation process that happens. And all three of those individuals, if they're doing their job correctly, even though they have various levels of responsibility or training, they need to have that same leadership bedside manner. And you and I we've all had providers, doctors, and nurses that did not have it.
Yeah.
And you'll fire them in a hot second. In fact, there's a lot of legal talk right now about how even lack of bedside manner can sometimes get a doctor sued because of
Mm.
not understanding. So what I've done is I've taken that same concept of that escalation and a reminder of what's happening is there's a wound and a person that needs just to be taken care of. We call them the three H's. They need someone who will be honest with them. They need to be heard and they need to be held. So while the emergency is still happening, none of these responsible people should be talking about blame or money or anything other than how can we help you? How can we make the pain less? In the business setting, it's the same thing. You have your frontline manager, you then have maybe a VP or someone over them, and then you have the C-suite. So I train them to maintain that same escalation and that leadership bedside manner so that through the insult or the injury, whatever it is, the leaders know how to take care of the person until there's some healing, and then you can go back and talk about, well, whose fault was it that went through the traffic stop or whatever. So that's the concept.
What caused that crash?
That right. That's a secondary thing.
Right. That's right. And like that too, as you mentioned, the C-suite, the chief executive officer, chief financial officer, chief operation officer, all of them, chief financial officer, chief security officer,
Yep.
that
Yep.
whole C-suite to get them on board. Because as you're mentioning, some of the processes that we have followed in the past have not been as strong or straightforward as we need them to be. And many times that's because that C-suite, all those chief executive officers, chief financial officers,
All those
chief
chiefs.
executive officer are not behind. I would play a joke here, but I do have another joke. Speaking of CIO, chief information officer, we don't want to say the chief idiot officer. I didn't say that. Not going to go there. I'm just kidding. But that's one of the things that we have. We don't have some of the control that you're talking about, Jason, that we can see that sometimes there's a stopping point. There's, there's more we can do. We have to cut the line at times and be upfront,
Yep.
but we want to be able to encourage them early enough, want to be able to inspire them early
I
enough,
like
be able to have that
no,
union.
I like that. And I'll tell you another concept that I'm big on sharing just to help people to see those maybe those inefficiencies in a corporate or an organizational setting. Okay, everybody knows that 911 is the number to call when there's a medical emergency. So I always pose this question to organization leaders, what's the 911 in your organization? Because here's the reality. All they know is they have someone, a superior that's over them, some sort of designation, manager, project manager. They have HR, right? And there's legal, they have these entities, but who is the person, going back to the EMT analogy, who is the leader that is the emotional management technician that they can go to that is the 911 for them? not the problem or not for the company necessarily, but it's for the person's wellness, their response. So
Exactly.
that's another thing we need to do better on bridging so that everyone in the organization knows what 911 is for them.
And you say that within many companies, as you're talking about who it is or where it is, it's not that there's not one in most companies, but is it a shared contact?
Mm,
How many people know that there is a 911 within the company? And here's where you go. When you said that, I first, again, as you mentioned, also HR, human resources.
hmm.
And that's where most people, I think, would go. But that might not be the best place. And if the company, that C-suite, is not sharing it with their management, it's not sharing it with their management, their leadership, who's
That's
going to
it.
know?
That
How are they
thank
going
you.
to know what number to dial?
And it's not, I'm not saying any of this is easy. It's very it's complex in organizations for sure, but what I try to do to bridge that gap is at least if the frontline managers at least have an EMT mindset, and I can get them to get better at just dealing with the look, we get calls on EMS. We get calls every day. None of it stops. You guys don't think about how we feel,
Yeah.
or if you call us, you want us there right now. You want us yesterday. And I feel for frontline managers because I was one for so long. Nobody cares about how they're doing. They just need to respond to every emergency real time. And so we try to at
Mhm.
least give them some training and some support so that they don't burn out. Much the same that EMTs actually have a process internally where they can do a stress debriefing, and they can kind of do what they need to do after a bad call in order to stay in the game. So that's the kind of thing we try to help sort of model as well in the workplace.
That's beautiful. And as you were talking about that, it made me think back to many years ago. I took a course. I was in Littleton, Colorado. It's a suburb of Denver, Colorado. And they had a citizens committee, a citizens course, a police advisory course that we weren't advising them, but they were letting us know we had 10 weeks, 2 hours a night, and they showed us what the police department, what they deal with and what they have to go through. I rode with a police officer one night, but what ties most to this is they allowed us to sit in the emergency reception room where those 911 calls are coming into. And one
Mm,
thing that I thought about, not only do many people know about that 911, they're not probably uh, 40% of the calls that come in are not true emergencies, but are
that's right.
people who don't know about that 911 number. What is what is it for and how do I use it and what makes it a 911 situation, right?
Yeah, very good. Yep, very true.
And I don't know what you teach in yours, but the people calling up, they could have problems in the kitchen with what they're cooking. And they call 911 thinking this is a disaster. And for them, it is
That
from
that
their
that
teaching, from their learning, from their culture.
that's right.
But it's not what you call 911 for. But I guess the point to my story there is all of these wonderful operators are taught how to handle those and to make sure that the person that called in doesn't feel bad about calling 911, but to help them understand this is when you call 911 and situations like this are not.
Ah, very
But a little
nice.
bit of
Yeah.
training in that process. So I don't know if that's something you could work in with your companies and dealing with them, because how many times do they come to the C-suite, whoever, with problems that they could take on themselves?
Yes. Yep. Well said. Well said.
Well, tell me something more about that. As far as what we're doing now and with the C-suite and management and leadership, how do you help leaders develop and realize that they must develop that executive bedside manner to improve that emotional intelligence? to improve that crisis response. How do you help them develop that? Again, that
I-
executive bedside manner.
Interesting question. Mark, what we found to be the case is even though when someone's going through a medical emergency, the physiological impact on their heart rate, their blood pressure, the sweat glands is off the charts because they're going through an emergency. What we've found through studies in emotional intelligence, Dan Goleman, I follow him quite a bit, the father of EQ or EI. When they strap people onto fMRI machines and they measure heart rate and all that, people that are going through a stressful situation, under the hood, they're going through a very similar scenario, and it's having a very damaging effect on their heart, even more so sometimes than what the medical emergency would. So the first step is we have to help leaders to see that emotional trauma is akin to or similar to an actual medical emergency for the person. Everything that's happening to them
Hmm.
is that serious. Now, that's the first step. The second step is this, and I think you'll find this interesting. Well, let me ask you, when's the last time you took an actual CPR, hands-on CPR and first aid class?
Oh, it's been decades, but when I was working full-time permanent for a position, they did have those,
Okay,
but that was decades ago.
decades. Now, here's what's interesting about that, what I see, because I do this every week around the country. You can take the toughest, roughest dude or woman, and you get them in a CPR class, and I get them on the ground, and they start doing the practice on the mannequins, and the compassion, the humanity in them. There's a there's a little switch that changes, and it reaches into the compassion part of every human being, the humanity in us. So what I actually do, and I'm a firm believer in this, when managers, when I get together with them, especially when we do a workshop, I actually train them, Mark. The first thing we do in the workshop is they get a CPR and first aid class.
Hmm. I did not know that was still in existence. That's
Absolutely.
excellent.
So what happens is when they see that when I touch them in that way because they're thinking about their loved ones and they're thinking about their mortality, what it does is it touches a different part of their heart and their mind. And then when I'm done with that hour or two, we don't spend all day with it. Then what we do is we walk right over and we get into the tabletop exercises and we make the parallels because they're still in that compassion frame of mind.
Good.
So when they do the tabletops for the leadership stuff and they start applying how to take care of someone who's choking at work or someone that's bleeding out, so to speak. So the concept is we try to encourage them to stay um, in touch with what you might call life-altering events or things like a medical emergency that will remind you that a lot of the stuff that you're holding is in your mind as a manager is petty stuff because in reality it takes a class like that or some touch with mortality sometimes to get you out of the idea that we pay them good money, they should be able to handle this,
Right.
and it's not the case. That's not how we're built.
Mm-mm. And that goes to the same thing that I teach a lot of is our culture and our learning. And just because someone is smart in a certain area, that doesn't mean they're smart in all areas. And when you talk about something like CPR, most of what we learn or relearn is from the television.
That's it.
And whatever they say on television then becomes our reality,
That's
even
so
though
true.
that that's just a television show. That's whatever writer wrote those words for that actor to say
That's it.
may or might not be true, right?
So true.
So our culture has to be retrained in the process because there's so many things that we learn from childhood to the school, to our senior levels in school, to secondary schools, to adulthood in our workplace. There's many things that we learn that may not be correct, may have been at one time, but today they're not. So that's what I like about what you're doing and what you're teaching. So how, let me kind of touch the next area that I like about what you do in high stake situations. They're high stake. How do you help leaders maintain clarity? How do you help them maintain that confidence and that control in what they do? Is that something that you work on?
Yes. And here's the thing that we start with them identifying the three areas so that when they respond to a workplace drama or trauma situation, they don't get wrapped up in what we call distracting injuries. So here's what happens. If I show up on an EMS call and someone's screaming bloody murder and I see a bunch of blood, it's very hard for me not to get sucked into that thing and think that that's the worst problem around. But if I don't pause and remind myself to make sure that my safety comes first, I may run in there and miss the dog that the person has in their house. And guess what? The minute I go to reach to try to help grandma, I get bit, right? Or maybe there's an attacker still in the building or whatever. So the first thing we do is we teach them scene safety always comes first for you as the responder. So there's more details on that, but in essence, when the leader walks into a situation, we have him develop the mindset that he's going to answer a couple questions. Okay, how bad is this situation? Is this a bleed out? Like, is this a today thing? Got to be done today, right? Is this a choking situation where I can tell they're about to pass out, right?
Right.
Or if their heart has basic, if they're figurative, if their heart is not well, then we basically teach them to address those immediately and in a way that has that leadership bedside manner. And we literally have them do this, Mark. If I responded to you in a car accident, we teach body position, we teach language, we teach everything. So if I come up, I'm not going to stand over you like this because that doesn't make you feel good. I'm going to be down like this. I'm also probably going to be a little bit positioned this way, not facing you head on. My tone is going to be low. And my first words out of my mouth are, I'm so sorry this happened. I'm here to support. See, leaders, the problem with us men especially is that we're there to save the day and feel like we have to fix it. When in reality, what happened to them is going to require weeks and maybe surgery and lots of medicine. So I help. The first thing we do is we teach them to respond like a first responder, like an EMT, and you just want to tell them, you want to say, I'm sorry this happened, even if they were the ones that made the mistake and they caused the accident for the company or something else. You doesn't give you a right to not. You should still respond with good bedside manner. And so it's, man, I'm so sorry this happened. Can you imagine how that would touch the heart of the person because they're feeling probably guilty or mad that it happened, and to hear their superior say, "Ah, I am so sorry this is happening. How are you doing? I'm here to support, no matter what. Even if it's that measures have to be taken or there's some punitive action, that shouldn't change my response because I'm more worried about the fact that someone got hit.
Yep.
So that's kind of that's the opening, the beginning of the training.
I like what you're saying too, because as we talked about earlier, you mentioned that the finding wrong, people go into something, they want to find blame. They want to find who did what, who did something wrong. Instead of, like you just said, I'm sorry about this situation, whatever situation that might be that caused it. Are you okay?
That's it. And then we add this, Mark. We say, where does it hurt? Because one of the biggest mistakes that we as EMTs make in the field is we try to assume that we know what's going wrong with the person. I've seen this 100 times. And so we make all kinds of assumptions when in reality, no, no, no. This has never happened before on the planet to this individual at this particular time. So we treat them to take every response is unique and has to be treated as such. And I use a lot of coaching principles. One of my favorite books, oh, it's up there somewhere, is The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier.
I've
And
heard of the
Michael
book.
talks, oh, it's fantastic. And Michael basically is saying that we are often triaging the wrong problem. So there's a series of triage questions that we will ask to make sure that we understand before we start treating. And it's the same way in the business setting. So executive bedside manner is actually just becoming a good detective first, and then being a compassionate human being and responding to someone who's in distress. There's no bravado to it. You don't have to
Mm.
have any special air or any special, it's basically those elements.
And I like what you're talking about there too, because as you look at situations, taking in a business environment, most of my previous work was information technology. And sometimes you get to a level that you're called a lot when something does go wrong. And when you have, should be called abnormal end in the computer industry many, many years ago, when there was that crash in the middle of the night, they had to call somebody in, call in the technician, pretty much like yourself as a emergency technician,
Hmm.
stop the bleeding to come in and find out what's wrong, correct the problem, get the application running again, make sure everybody's accounts are updated correctly, no data is lost, and be able to do that and not find wrong with somebody because in all of this IT work, information technology, all this coding and development, there's supposed to be somebody's name at the top of that program. And
Mm,
that ability to find that problem, correct that problem, and not assigning blame to someone, because one of the things that I look at is many times, back to the culture and our learning, sometimes in our requirements to the situation, that was never discussed. That
mm,
situation was never thought about. And I'm
mm.
not sure how much you get that in the medical life health situations, things that come up that, well, they didn't teach us this.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Happens all the time.
that's, does it? Okay.
Oh my. Every medical emergency is going to be different. That's why the point of bedside manner, what's strong about that. And it's not always something that people come in and they're worried about the steps, like do this first and then put the patch on and then do this. And although you do need to gain technical prowess and proficiency over time, the very first thing that anyone's ever going to remember about you is, were you a jerk or did you treat them with kindness? So I tell new EMTs, man, if you don't learn professionalism, I can't help you. You need to do that first. And in EMS, man, we get swung at, spit on. There's all kind because they're having the worst day of their life.
Wow.
Oh yeah,
Hmm.
they're having the worst day of their life, Mark. So you have to have that ability to say, this isn't about me, it's about them having a really bad day. And then you stay with them and you support them through it. Get them in the back of the ambulance. Don't raise your voice. Yeah, it's just the dynamics are it's a great allegory. It's a great fit in leadership space.
And that's good that you're mentioning to us because a lot of us, I hope, needless to say, have never been in situations like that. And for you to say somebody might spit at you or be angry at you when you're there to help them, that's a new perspective to a lot of us. Because if you're coming there to help me, I am having the worst day of my life, as you're saying, but why would I treat you that way unless, like you're saying, you are being that jerk
That's right.
and not being open? And that puts a whole new perspective to the problem, doesn't it?
And I tell people the thing is with emergencies is that people are not in their right mind. It's the same at work. When someone the thing that goes through, here's what's flooding through a person's mind who's having a medical emergency. I don't want an ER bill.
Oh, true.
I don't want an ambulance bill. I don't want to go get COVID at the hospital. I can't believe that the person that just hit me got away, whatever.
Hmm.
The thing is, that's why it's so important, and there's the same carryover on the leadership side, is that that's why we start with making a strong case that emotional trauma is having the same physiological effect on someone as a medical
So true.
emergency. Because if you don't see it that way and you're like, hey, buck up, hey, tough it up, hey, we pay you well, hey, this comes with the job, you shouldn't have signed on. Well, I mean, that's just sweeping it under the carpet more and more.
Hmm. And a lot of times that's because the person who's saying that doesn't know. I've got another one that I talk about.
Yeah.
It's about it's another word for KISS, but it's CIIS, childishness, immaturity, insecurity, and spite. And that just and people
Yes.
come in and they don't know how to handle themselves, even though in most cases it could be good people, but how is it coming back to them at the time? And
That's
they're
it.
not acting in their normal way. They're not acting in their professional way. And it comes out that, hey, if I've got a broken arm, because I think about a broken arm, everybody's got a same, what's it on the same two bones in there in our arm. I can't think what they are called. I confused my leg. Which leg arm is it? Femur, tibia. I can't remember what they are.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and you've messed up their life. Somehow their life is messed up, and they're going to get blamed. And many times maybe there was nothing they could do, no way they could get out of it. But here they are. They've been
yeah,
hurt, and their life has been impacted. Who are they going to blame? And we need to get all of us
yeah.
need to get out of that phase, that mode, and
And
think about,
one of the things we do to help with some of the language is we highlight the fact that not everything is a 911. It may be an 811, or it may be a
mm,
611, or it may be a 411, right? So basically what we do is, not that we're trying to make it company policy, but when we show leaders that they can use that language to their coworker and say, "Hey, just so I know, is this a 911?" See, the language is the key to getting an understanding of how bad is this for them. Is this a 911
mhm.
for you? And if they're like, you better believe it, then we've already had that conversation, and I know that that means you have some trauma, and I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna attend to it.
Yeah, so true. Jason, here we've gone and we're running over time. I think I could talk to you, and I'm sure the audience would like to listen to a lot more, but we only have a few minutes left. This has been exciting, a tremendous learning experience talking to you and listening to you and hearing some new concepts about how you work, the acronyms that you pulled together in helping us build a better life. Do you have a close quickly that you could maybe help us with as we close the podcast today and take it with us as we go forward?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in my coaching work, that's the EMT standing for Earn Money Today. The concept I think is, and I learned this from one of my business coaches, so this will be my closing thought. We get stuck in many times in business and in life, in leadership roles. We get stuck in they've called it paralysis by analysis, right? There's
Mhm.
also um, there's also this, you talked about decision fatigue earlier on, whatever you want to label it. I call it, we're always learning but never earning. If you're an entrepreneur, we're always feeling like, well, if it's just it's the next thing. If I can get that next certificate, if I can get the program a little bit better, everything will go fine. What I'll leave with the audience here today is that nothing in life is ever that way. Nothing in emergencies are certainly ever that way. And so what we need, what my encouragement to people is just start. Let let the direction or let the decision inform the direction. Decide to do something. And look, I've had times where I tried to do something on someone and it hurt them worse. And guess what? You can say, I'm sorry. And but you have to act, right? So that's what we're promoting is just whether it's in business or anything else. I teach people how to start their first pilot program. Don't be afraid of the things you get wrong in life are what you're going to remember the most from.
That's right. That is so true. Thank you so much, Jason. I sure appreciate you being here. This has been an excellent podcast. The information you brought to each and every one of us is going to be beautiful. And we'll have this out onto YouTube later. If you want to come back and watch the recording, you and I know we'll work together, continue working together, because as I tell people, and I think you're doing some of the same things, because I build bridges, real bridges, bridges between people building unity. And that's where we need to go next. So,
I
Jason,
love
again,
it.
thank you so much. Hope we can get together. Hope we can have you on the podcast again here in the next few months. Next year at the latest. Let's get
Appreciate
together.
appreciate the opportunity, Mark, and what you're
All
doing
right.
for Unity. It can't be said enough. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Enjoy your day, everyone. Thanks for being here. Hope to see you again next Wednesday. Cheers.